Imagine biting into a burger on the side of the road. Juicy, smoky, and unlike anything you've ever tasted before. You lick your fingers, wondering what the secret ingredient is, and the man behind the grill just smiles and says, "It's a family recipe." Now imagine finding out years later that the meat inside that burger was not pork, not beef, but something far more horrifying. This is the chilling story of Joe Metheny, the man who turned his victims into hamburgers. Joe Metheny's story begins like many troubled lives. Born in Baltimore in the 1950s, he grew up in poverty. He claimed his childhood was filled with neglect, saying his parents abandoned him at a young age. But those who later investigated his life argued differently. They said he wasn't a neglected child at all, that he simply grew into a violent man. And Joe himself admitted later on that much of what he said about his childhood wasn't an excuse. It was just his way of controlling the story. By the 1970s and 80s, Metheny was already living on the edge of society. He was a large man, weighing well over 400 pounds and had a frightening, dominating presence. He drifted between jobs, truck driver, laborer, and even a soldier for a short time. But his life soon revolved around drugs, alcohol, and the darker corners of Baltimore's underbelly. He was obsessed with control, with power, and with violence. And it was in this world, surrounded by addicts and the homeless, that Metheny began his killing spree. His first known murders happened in the mid-1990s. According to his own chilling confessions, he lured vulnerable women to his home, often those struggling with addiction, and killed them in brutal ways. But what made him infamous was not just the murders, it was what he did with the bodies afterward. Joe Metheny was a man who wanted to erase evidence in a way that nobody could imagine. Instead of hiding the bodies in rivers or woods like many killers, he had a far more grotesque plan. He chopped up the remains, mixed the flesh with pork, and ground it into burger meat. Then, with the calmness of someone running a normal business, he set up a small roadside food stand. Day after day, locals would stop by, craving his burgers. Truck drivers, workers, even families with kids, all lining up for what they thought was a cheap meal on the road. And every time they bit into one of his burgers, they would often compliment the taste. People would even ask him, "Joe, what's in your seasoning? What's your secret?" And he would grin and say, "It's a family recipe." The horrifying truth was that they were eating human flesh. His victims turned into food. Metheny later bragged in confessions that if you had eaten one of my burgers, you'd never know the difference. He claimed that mixing human flesh with pork made it impossible to tell. The thought alone is enough to make your stomach turn. How many unsuspecting people ate at his stand, completely unaware of what was in their food? For years, Metheny operated in the shadows. He wasn't killing every day, but enough to feed his twisted desires. He claimed to have murdered more than 10 people, though authorities could only confirm a smaller number. Still, his confessions painted a picture of a man who enjoyed not just killing, but making others complicit in his crimes without them even knowing. Eventually, his gruesome operation unraveled. In 1996, police connected him to the disappearances of several women. A deeper investigation into his property revealed evidence of his crimes. When confronted, Metheny didn't deny it. In fact, he confessed with a disturbing sense of pride. He told detectives exactly what he had done, describing the murders, the dismemberments, and the way he used the meat grinder to mix flesh into burger patties. But perhaps the most chilling part of his confessions was his attitude. He showed no remorse. He even laughed about it, telling investigators, "You've probably eaten one of them." Imagine being a detective sitting across from a man who says that, knowing that what he's describing might be true. When Metheny went to trial, the details horrified the public. Newspaper headlines called him the Cannibal Killer, though technically he wasn't eating his victims, he was making others do it unknowingly. The thought that ordinary people had been tricked into cannibalism turned his case into one of the most shocking crime stories of the decade. He was eventually convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. He avoided the death penalty, but he never expressed regret. In interviews and statements, he seemed almost proud of what he had done, as if he wanted to be remembered as one of the most twisted killers in history. Joe Metheny died in prison in 2017 at the age of 62. He was found unresponsive in his cell, his life ending quietly after decades of horror. But the legend of his crimes continues to terrify people today. The thought of something as innocent as a burger being turned into a weapon of terror is a nightmare that still haunts the minds of anyone who hears his story. And perhaps the most disturbing question all remains unanswered: how many people actually ate Joe Metheny's burgers? Authorities could never track down everyone who visited his food stand. Some may never know they were part of one of the most chilling true crime stories of all time. This story is not just about a killer. It's about trust. How easily people place their trust in the food they eat, in the strangers they meet, in the ordinary things of daily life. Joe Metheny turned something so normal, so harmless, into a stage for one of the darkest crimes imaginable. So the next time you bite into a burger, just remember, do you really know what's inside? This has been another dark descent into true crime, told to you by Phantom Dossier. If you want more stories like this, disturbing, chilling, and unforgettable, make sure to subscribe and stay with us, because the shadows of history always have more secrets waiting to be uncovered.